Hello everyone, my name is Loko and welcome to a new video. In this video I'm going to be discussing all the changes for Legacy of the Void, the upcoming expansion for StarCraft 2 and actually the very final expansion for StarCraft 2. And I'm going to be focusing mainly on the multiplayer of the game. If you are interested in hearing all of my thoughts on the multiplayer ever, make sure to subscribe down below because, that's going to be a separate video that I will be uploading in the next week or so. Today we're just going to be discussing all the actual changes and the new units and all that sort of awesomeness. For anyone who missed it or simply wants a really quick recap. I'm gonna try and actually keep this video really compact so everyone can hear all the changes in just a couple of minutes. I'm not completely sure if that's really going to happen, but hey, we can try. So first off, Legacy of the Void is going to be the final expansion for StarCraft 2, but it's not going to be just an expansion, it's actually also going to be a standalone game. So if you are watching this in the future and you are looking to get into StarCraft 2, you don't actually need to buy Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm anymore, it will just be Legacy of the Void that you will need. Now with Legacy of the Void there's gonna be two new multiplayer modes. First off there's gonna be Allied Commander, basically a co-op that you can play with a friend. And next up there's also going to be Archon mode. And Archon mode is going to be a separate ladder where basically two players play on one base. So that means that you can basically, perfect every single thing. It's gonna be very interesting to see two professional gamers play Archon mode at a very high level because everything is going to be straight up perfect. Now one of the main aspects to the multiplayer is that they are going to change up the economy of the game. You are going to be seeing a lot more people sitting on 4, 5, maybe even 6 bases because every single mineral patch is going to contain less minerals, and with that you also start with more workers. Meaning that your main base will actually be mined out right around the 10-minute mark or so, whereas right now that is quite a bit later. Now with the economy changes, Blizzard is also obviously introducing new units and new abilities to the game. The main focus being that they want the game to be less passive. They want players to actually be able to even win big battles with a smaller army. Even if you messed up in macro, you should still be able to squeeze out a victory if your opponent messes up. So the general approach here is to make the game less passive and to add more active abilities to the game. Now first off, let's talk about a new Zerg unit called the Lurker. Now for anyone that played Brood War, this unit really needs no introduction. It morphs off of the Hydralisk and it needs to burrow to attack. It does a very high amount of splash damage, but obviously the range is kind of short. However, there is going to be an upgrade that allows the Lurker to actually have extended range, and they will be able to take out any kind of base defense without being hit. So that means they can kill planetary fortresses, they can kill cannons without any problems whatsoever. Now obviously your opponents can micro against this unit, but it is going to be the first one that gets added to the Zerg army. Next up, another unit that also gets added is called the Ravager. And now the Ravager has one main ability that breaks force fields. And I think this is a pretty important one. It morphs off of a roach, and the unit shoots some sort of fireball at relatively slow speed but with high amounts of damage. It is great against stationary units such as siege tanks and lurkers and whatnot, but obviously other units can quite easily dodge it. The main aspect, however, that it's very good against is force fields, because they do get broken by the hit of this ability. Next up, there are also another bunch of Zerg changes. The very first one being the Nydus network. You can now actually put out multiple Nydus networks, and you can also not hit them anymore while they are spawning. So even though your opponent can see them, they cannot so much kill them until the worm is completely spawned. This will allow Zerg to actually be a lot stronger against like turtling Terrans and turtling Protosses and whatnot, and obviously this will make the game a whole lot more dynamic. Swarmos are going to be changed to be more of an harassment sort of unit, so instead of them being a unit that you can turtle up with, they will be a lot more aggressive. The cooldown of the locusts is going to be a lot longer, however, you don't need to be burrowed anymore to spawn locusts, and the locusts are going to be a lot higher in damage. The Swarmos will also get an upgrade that will allow them to actually make the locusts fly, so you can use them to harass planetary fortresses and to basically harass sieged enemy lines. Infestors will get a new spell. This spell will allow them to basically cast an AoE ability on a whole lot of allied units. So what happens is that all of these allied units, all of your friendly units, will get a damage buff. Meaning that if you cast this, for example, on a group of Zerglings or on an Ultralisk, their damage will be a lot higher. Last but not least, they have also changed up Corruptors. Corruptors do not have their corrupt ability anymore. However, they gain a new ability that actually deals damage to buildings and to units. It gets stronger over time, so usually you're going to be using this on buildings, simply to take out like a very quick planetary fortress or something like that. Now this might mean that the damage to anti-air with the removal of the corruption ability is going to be a little bit too low, so Blizzard is currently looking into this, and there is a pretty big chance that the damage of the corruptor will also get increased. Now next up, the Terran units. The Terrans also got a bunch of changes to the multiplayer expansion, including 2 new units. First off, Terran will get a new unit called the Herc. The Herc is a barracks unit with a grapple ability. The grapple ability allows it to basically grapple towards an enemy unit and kill it very quickly. It is very strong early game and it can basically one-shot banelings. So for Terran players that makes it very strong versus a mainly Ling baneling sort of army. The unit is designed to sync very well with the Marine Marauder Ball, however it overlaps a little bit with the Fire Bat and Blizzard is still looking into that. Next up we have the Cyclone. The Cyclone is a unit that can move and shoot at the same time, sort of like the Phoenix. It made me think a lot of the Diamondback from the Wings of Liberty campaign, and it can shoot and ride at the same time with high amounts of damage to air and to ground. The Cyclone synchronizes very well with the mech units that Terran already has out there, and they are very likely to be added into the mix of Banshees, Siege Tank, Thors and whatnot. Thors will have a new ability that allows them to self-repair, meaning that even in the middle of a battle, you can use this ability to get the Thor back to full health. Now what this obviously will mean as well is that the Thor will not be able to attack and they will also stand still while this ability is active. Banshees will also get a couple of changes. First off, they will have Cloak by default, and they will also have a faster movement speed upgrade in the Fusion Core, allowing them to outrun any kind of detection unit that is currently in the game. This allows the Banshees to get safely home and maybe even repaired, without being in that much trouble. In Legacy of the Void, Terrans will also be able to drop siege tanks. And this is a big change, because that previously was not possible. You could only drop unsiege tanks. And it will practically give Terran a unit like the Reaver in Brood War. This allows Terrans to be a lot more aggressive with drops, not just with their marine bio, however they can now also drop the siege tank with it, and this might be a very strong combination. Last but not least, Battlecruisers will also get a little bit of love. They will get a new ability called Tactical Jump. The Tactical Jump ability is very expensive in mana, however you can basically teleport the Battlecruiser across the map, allowing it to travel at warp speed, and what will happen is that you can, for example, push them straight into the battle or out of the battle without losing a single one. Obviously Protoss also got a bunch of new stuff, however they only got one new unit added. The unit is called the Disruptor, and the Disruptor is basically an invulnerable mine unit that comes out of the robotics facility. While it is casting its ability, it will be invulnerable, however after casting the ability it does not have an attack. It explodes after a few seconds and it does high amounts of splash damage. It only hits ground, it does not hit air, and it overlaps a little bit with the Colossus, also being a robotics facility unit, and that also deals splash damage. Immortals are also changed. Immortals currently have a Hardened Shield ability that is a passive ability that every single Immortal has, allowing them to soak up more damage as long as they have shields. In Legacy of the Void, however, this is going to be removed and they will get an active ability called Barrier. And Barrier you can activate to get some extra shield on your Immortal. Another major change that will be added is that Blizzard doesn't like the fact that you can just warp in the middle of a fight. Warping in units will now take 200% more damage and it will take a little bit longer to warp in. So you're not really allowed to, for example, when a Zerg runs by, you're not really allowed anymore to just warp in like 2 or 3 Zealots and not look at it anymore, because the Zealots will simply die. This forces the Protoss to warp in at a more tactical location and then actually move the units around. There are also a bunch of changes to the Oracle. The Oracle will have its current 2 abilities merged, allowing them to both envision and spot cloaked minions, for example, or to simply just envision units that aren't cloaked. A new ability called Stasis Wards will be added to the Oracle that functions sort of like spider mines in Brood War. Stasis wards can be put down by the Oracle, and as soon as an enemy unit touches the stasis ward, it will be unable to move and it will be unable to be hit for a short duration. Basically nullifying some timing attacks by 100% because the Terran or the Zerg or the Protoss can simply not move across the map. Warp Prisms also get a change. Instead of them having to be on top of the unit they are trying to pick up, they can now pick up the unit from a short distance. And last but not least, there are a couple of changes to the Tempest. They can now only hit ground units, have a faster movement speed ability, and they will get a strong damage over time spell that they can cast called Disintegration. And this will be basically killing any kind of enemy units over time. However, obviously, while this spell is being active, the unit can still fight. Last but not least, carriers can now release all of their interceptors at once and then back off, meaning that the carriers have now an harassment sort of potential without them having to be in the actual fight. As soon as the interceptors are released, the carrier can also start reproducing those instantly again, meaning that you can constantly harass with the unit. Now these are all the changes that Blizzard has currently announced for the upcoming expansion. Please keep in mind that this is indeed before the alpha is even available. So this obviously means that there are a couple of really big changes that are definitely going to be happening. They even said there's a big chance that the Protoss will get a second unit added to their lineup. Simply because obviously Zerg got 2 new units, the Terran got 2 new units, and this is the Protoss expansion and they only got 1 new unit. And with that there's also a bunch of overlapping stuff, such as the new Protoss unit that overlaps the Colossus in splash damage and being out of the robotics facility, and obviously the Hellbat overlapping with the new Cyclone from the Terrans. Both are a little bit tanky and both can soak up a lot of damage and deal a lot of damage. You know, there's a lot of overlap right there, and there is definitely a very big chance that they are going to be changing a whole lot of the things that I just mentioned. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button because it helps me out a ton. Make sure you dislike it if you didn't like it, but then you probably didn't make it to this point of the video. And if you actually want to hear my thoughts on all of these changes, make sure to subscribe down below because I will be uploading a video in the next week or so explaining you all my thoughts on these upcoming changes. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!